They say I see big homies out here still teaching the homies politicking about being in the hood. I feel my job is to show niggas how to get out of it. You know what I mean? Because, you know, the hood always call us back. We always going back to the hood. We always, you know, we got to say, you know what? It's a whole better life away from that shit. You know, because now I look at everything over there, nothing but drama, nothing but death. You know what I mean? So, yeah, this is my house going right here, boy, 360 house.
Cowboy was Nipsey Hussle's day one homie and a respected rolling 60s crip before he did something that got the whole hood talking, and not in a good way. Let's take a look at why one of the most loyal soldiers in Crenshaw decided to pack up everything and disappear into the desert, and how the streets are reacting to his controversial move. Herman Cowboy Douglas is a former rolling 60s crip from Los Angeles, best known for being Nipsey Hussle's closest friend and the man who was holding him as he took his last breaths. Born and raised in LA, Cowboy first grew up in Windsor Hills before his family moved to Ladera Heights around 1987. His moms wanted to get the family to a more upper-class part of the hood, but all his friends were still in the streets, so that's where he stayed hanging. Growing up in the rolling 60s territory, Cowboy had to adapt to the neighborhood politics whether he wanted to or not. In LA, where you live determines what you claim. If your mom moved to 39th Street, you're automatically affiliated with whoever runs that block. It wasn't really a choice, it was survival. The thing about LA gang culture that outsiders don't understand is that it's not just about wanting to be tough or making money. When you're born in certain neighborhoods, you inherit decades-old beefs that got nothing to do with you personally. Your zip code becomes your identity, and that identity comes with enemies you never met but who might try to kill you just for walking through the wrong area. The rolling 60s and 8-tray gangster beef that started in 1979 literally split LA in half. Before that, it was mainly Crips versus Bloods, but when the 60s and trays started going at it, every gang in the city had to pick sides. You were either rolling with the neighborhood car or the gangster car, and that decision determined who your enemies were for life. When Cowboy was a teenager walking through the hood one day, the big homies rolled up on him hard. They wanted to know who he was and where he was from. He told them he was from the hood but didn't have a street name yet. What happened next was a traditional putting on. 3 homies took him to the back and they had to squabble. This wasn't no jumping or beat down. It was more like childhood friends fighting. If you fell down, they'd let you get back up and keep scrapping. Back then, the politics were different. They'd fight you one-on-one, and when it was over, they'd pick you up and dust you off. Fortunately for Cowboy, he held his own that day and never hit the ground. After proving he could handle himself, they accepted him into the rolling 60s. But this came with a price. He automatically inherited all the beefs the 60s had with other sets. Around this time, Cowboy started getting locked up regularly. Juvenile Hall, Central, Los Padrinos, all the different youth facilities. The cycle was predictable. Get arrested, do time, come home, get back in the streets, repeat. By his late teens, he was fully embedded in the gang lifestyle, but he also had bigger aspirations. What most people don't know is that Cowboy had talent beyond the streets. In '96, he started doing stand-up comedy at the Comedy Act Theater at Ladera Park. His friend's uncle owned the venue where comedians like Chris Tucker and Martin Lawrence got their start. Cowboy would put the lights on for other comedians, and one day they dared him to get on stage. When the crowd laughed, he never looked back. Comedy became his heart. This creative side would later become crucial to his relationship with Nipsey. While other homies saw rap as just something to do on the corner, Cowboy understood the business and artistic side of entertainment. The day that would change both their lives forever happened when Cowboy spotted a young dude walking through the neighborhood. The kid had on some khakis and chucks, looking like he banged but wasn't claiming anything. This was around 2003 or 2004, and Cowboy had just come home from prison. Cowboy pulled up on him and asked where he was from. The youngster said his name was E, and he didn't bang, but Cowboy could see it coming from miles away. Look, you might not bang now, but some enemies roll up. They gon' think you bang. If you're in the 60s and you look like you bang, they coming at you regardless. At first, the other homies weren't really feeling E. They knew he was a rapper, and back then, rappers weren't always respected in the hood. The homies would say stuff like, "Oh, that's just E, he's just a rapper," trying to dismiss him. But Cowboy saw something different in the kid. He was on some grown man shit, talking about real business and having actual vision. What made E special was that he was already conscious in his rapping. He wasn't glorifying the gang life just to glorify it. He had a message. But he was also looking for acceptance from the homies, wanting to belong somewhere. Cowboy could see where things were headed. I told him, next year or so, this dude's gonna be from the hood and he's gonna beat all y'all asses, he predicted. He was one of the underdogs, but I knew he was gonna outshine everybody. The transformation happened exactly like Cowboy said it would. Once E got put on with the Rolling 60s and became Little Thundercat, then eventually Nipsey Hussle, he took that conscious rap style and added authentic hood credibility to it. He wasn't just talking about the streets from the outside, he was officially from one of the most notorious sets in LA. Their bond went deeper than just music or gang politics. They'd sit in Cowboy's grandmother's garage learning Pro Tools, just him, Nip, and a few other day ones like Felony and Rocco Gerard. When Cowboy started hearing Nipsey rap, he immediately stepped back and said, "It's all about you. You're gonna make it if you do this right." This is where Cowboy's comedy background helped. He understood entertainment and saw Nipsey's marketability before anybody else did. While other people were trying to use Nipsey for their own projects, Cowboy was focused on building Nipsey's individual brand. What made Nipsey's rise so complicated was that he was the first major artist to ever claim a specific set instead of just a city. Most rappers would say they're from Long Beach or Compton. Nipsey said he was from the Rolling 60s, one of the most violent Crip sets in LA. This created problems that other artists didn't have to deal with. When Nipsey did shows, sometimes 100 to 200 gang members would show up. Venues didn't know how to handle that type of crowd. They were worried about violence, shootings, or the place getting torn up. The solution came when Nipsey started collaborating with YG and The Game. Now you had Crip shows with blood artists, which meant both sides were represented and kept in check. If the Crips were acting up, Nip could handle that. If the Bloods were tripping, YG could control his people, Cowboy explained. This was revolutionary in LA, where Crips and Bloods traditionally couldn't even be in the same studio together. Big U was instrumental in making this happen, carefully watching music videos to make sure no rival gangs' names were crossed out in the background, avoiding anything that could spark new conflicts. Breaking the color barrier was bigger than just music. It was changing LA street politics. For decades, if you saw red, you attacked. If you saw blue, you attacked. Nipsey and YG showed that you could wear whatever colors you wanted if you moved with respect and intelligence. But success in the hood comes with its own problems. The higher Nipsey rose, the more people wanted to bring him down. Haters would test him at shows, drunk fans would get disrespectful, and Cowboy was always there to handle the situations Nipsey was too big to deal with directly. The day that changed everything started like any other Sunday. Cowboy was at the Marathon store organizing the back room when Nipsey pulled up around 7 in the morning on his four-wheeler. They had just filmed a video with DJ Khaled, and Nipsey was actually taking some rare time off. When Eric Holder walked up to them in the parking lot, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Nipsey didn't see him as an enemy. They had known each other for years. The conversation wasn't hostile at all. "Look, they got some paperwork floating around about you," Nipsey told Eric. "You know I ain't read nothing, but you need to take care of it." It was more like giving a homie a heads up, the kind of thing you tell a friend you hadn't seen in a while if you heard rumors about them. Eric's response was just, "These niggas be hating on me," and they actually shook hands before he left. But something happened between that conversation and when he came back with guns blazing just minutes later. Cowboy was inside the store eating when the gunshots started cracking off. He immediately knew something was wrong and ran out through 3 different doors to get to the parking lot. He was the first person to reach Nipsey after the shooting. "I see my bro lying there and he's trying to get up, Cowboy described. "I put my hand right here on his chest where the hole was, and I was covering it, praying for him. He was still breathing, still fighting." The scene was chaos. 2 other people had been shot, people were running everywhere, and Cowboy didn't even realize there were other victims because he was focused completely on Nipsey.
Okay, and you're the first person that basically gets over Nip's body.
Yeah.
How is he reacting to what just happened?
He just keep trying to get up. He kept trying to get up. He was breathing, trying to get up. He had like a hole right here, so I had my hand right here, and I was covering right here, and I was praying for him. And, like, just breathe, bro. Take it easy, just breathe. And he was breathing. He was breathing. And he kept just trying to get up. He kept fighting. You can just tell he kept fighting.
2 years later, when Eric Holder's trial began, Cowboy made a decision that violated everything he'd been taught about street politics. He agreed to testify. In gang culture, taking the stand for any reason is considered the ultimate violation. It doesn't matter if you're testifying against your worst enemy or trying to help your best friend. Snitching is snitching. What motivated Cowboy wasn't a desire to help prosecutors convict Eric Holder. They had video evidence and other witnesses for that. His sole purpose was to clear Nipsey's name from the false narrative that had taken hold in the streets. The backlash from the hood was swift and severe. Homies who had grown up with Cowboy, corners he had protected, sets he had put in work for, they all turned on him. The same people who claimed to love Nipsey were now calling his best friend a snitch for defending Nipsey's reputation. After testifying, Cowboy became a marked man in his own hood. The same streets that raised him were now unsafe for him. The culture that claimed to be about loyalty had turned on him for being loyal to Nipsey's memory. But the threat wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Cowboy was tired of a mentality that made defending your dead friend's reputation more controversial than killing that friend in the first place. The streets had become backwards, and he was done playing by rules that made no sense. The decision to leave was heavily influenced by conversations he'd had with Nipsey over the years. Nipsey had always talked about ownership, being the landlord instead of the tenant, having assets instead of liabilities, building generational wealth instead of living check to check. Cowboy started looking at his finances with new eyes. He was paying $16,000 a month just in rent for various properties in LA, stores, apartments, commercial spaces. All that money was going to landlords who didn't even live in his community, who extracted wealth without contributing anything back. Meanwhile, he had hundreds of thousands of dollars in jewelry sitting in safes, gold chains, watches, diamonds that represented status in the hood but had no productive value. They were just expensive ways to paint targets on your back. The transformation began with a trip to the pawn shop. One by one, Cowboy sold off the chains and jewelry that had defined his image for decades. Each piece represented years of trying to impress people who ultimately turned on him anyway. Cowboy didn't just move to a different neighborhood, he completely removed himself from the urban environment that had defined his existence. He bought 5 city blocks of raw desert land between LA and Vegas, a place he calls Sand City, referencing both the sandy terrain and its location between Sin City and LA. The contrast couldn't be more dramatic. Where he once paid $16,000 a month in rent for properties he didn't own, he now pays $500 a month for land that's completely his. The constant helicopter sirens and street drama have been replaced by the sound of dogs barking and absolute silence. On his property, Cowboy is literally building a new life with his own hands. The main house he's constructing will have 360-degree windows and a glass ceiling, giving him panoramic views of the desert landscape. Solar panels provide all his electricity, making him completely independent from utility companies. He's also building guest quarters for workers and visitors, storage areas for supplies, and planning an indoor fish pond. Everything is being constructed using free materials, rocks and stones that neighbors drop off to help with his projects. The land ownership represents something deeper than lifestyle change. It's generational wealth building. Cowboy gave his father an acre of the property and his wife's father another acre. He's creating something that can be passed down, something that appreciates instead of depreciating. His 9-year-old son now comes to the property regularly to learn construction skills, animal care, and land management. Instead of learning how to navigate gang politics and duck gunshots, the boy is learning carpentry, farming, and self-reliance. When Cowboy first started talking about buying desert land, the reaction from the hood was largely negative. Homies thought he had lost his mind, that the stress of Nipsey's death and the trial had made him crazy. However, Cowboy's obvious prosperity also makes him a bigger target. In gang culture, when someone breaks free and starts thriving, it can be seen as disrespectful to those still stuck in the cycle. His success challenges the narrative that leaving the hood makes you weak or fake. The fact that he's living openly on social media, showing his progress and discussing his new lifestyle, is both inspiring and potentially dangerous. Former friends and current enemies can see exactly where he is and what he's built. The broader reaction from Crip culture has been mixed but largely hostile. The streets operate on a mentality that once you're in for life. Leaving is seen as abandonment, as thinking you're better than everybody else. For someone as respected as Cowboy was, his departure sends a dangerous message to younger homies who might start questioning the lifestyle. If a day one like Cowboy can walk away and prosper, what does that say about the value of staying and fighting over corners? The combination of testifying and leaving has made Cowboy a pariah in his former community. Social media is full of former associates calling him a snitch, despite the fact that his testimony didn't provide any information that wasn't already public knowledge. Despite his confidence, Cowboy's isolated location in the desert could make him vulnerable to retaliation. Unlike in the city where there are witnesses and cameras everywhere, his remote property would be an ideal location for someone wanting to send a message. The irony is that his escape from urban violence has potentially put him in a more vulnerable position for targeted attacks, but Cowboy seems willing to accept that risk rather than continue living in a culture that had become toxic. What Cowboy's story illustrates most clearly is how gang culture creates a mental prison that's even harder to escape than the physical dangers. It teaches you to value things that don't build wealth, jewelry, cars, reputation, while discouraging behaviors that lead to real prosperity. This mindset shift separates those who escape the hood from those who don't. Instead of spending money on depreciating assets that make you a target, he invested in appreciating assets that build wealth. This is the message that gang culture actively suppresses, that you can trust your own judgment over groupthink, that you can choose your own path instead of inheriting someone else's beef. The most important change is how Cowboy is raising his son. In the hood, children learn survival skills, how to avoid getting shot, which corners to avoid, how to spot undercover police. On the homestead, they learn building skills, construction, farming, animal care, land management. Cowboy's transformation reveals that the real enemy isn't the rival gang from the next neighborhood. It's the mindset that keeps you focused on fighting over scraps instead of building something lasting. Already, Cowboy reports that other people from the hood are starting to consider similar moves. His social media posts showing the construction progress, the peace and quiet, the financial independence are having an impact on people still trapped in the cycle. This is the real threat to gang culture, not another rival set with guns, but the example of someone who walked away completely and prospered. If enough people follow Cowboy's example, who's left to fight over those corners? What makes the transformation even more powerful is that Cowboy is living out the exact vision Nipsey had been articulating for years. Nipsey always talked about ownership, about being the landlord instead of the tenant, about creating assets that appreciate. The streets will call it sucker shit, or acting white, or thinking you're better than everybody. But at the end of the day, Cowboy is sleeping peacefully under desert stars instead of jumping at every car backfiring in the hood. The transformation wasn't free. Cowboy lost his entire social network, his cultural identity, and his standing in the only community he'd ever known. But he gained something more valuable: actual freedom. While others are still arguing about who runs what block or who's the hardest, Cowboy is building generational wealth on land he actually owns. While others pay rent to landlords who don't live in their neighborhoods, he's become the landlord. The irony is that he's more authentically keeping it real than anybody still in the hood. He's really about that ownership Nipsey preached about, really living off the land like the strong black men who built this country, really providing for his family without depending on anybody else. Most importantly, Cowboy broke a generational curse. His son won't grow up inheriting decades-old beefs with people he's never met. He won't have to choose between rival gangs based on what street his mama moved to. He'll learn skills that build wealth instead of behaviors that lead to prison. It's tragic that it took losing his best friend to wake him up, but at least Cowboy used that tragedy as fuel to completely transform his life. Another homie who could have been another statistic chose instead to break the cycle and create something lasting. Nipsey always said the marathon continues, but maybe the real marathon isn't about staying in the hood and fighting over corners that you don't own. Maybe it's about having the vision to leave and build something that your great-grandchildren can inherit. The streets might call him a snitch or a sellout, but Cowboy is living proof that there's life after the hood, and it's a better life. He traded fake jewelry for real land, temporary respect for permanent ownership, and a culture of death for a lifestyle of building. R.I.P. Nipsey Hussle. The marathon continues, just not where everybody expected it to.